AI is going to do this, AI is going to do that.
FOMO as a business requirement.
I love that.
All right, here we are. Welcome, everyone. It is May 14th, 2025. We are here for the Microsoft 365 Community Conference recap. We do not have a full team today, but we do have, well, we are missing Todd and Carrie today. Carrie's out with some sniffles. Todd is in Jamaica. It's his favorite place. Again. So today's topic, as I said, Microsoft 365 Community Conference recap. We are going to go over the things we thought were worthy of discussing. So for that, sharing UI updates, that's a very big one. We'll go through what those updates are. Forms on document libraries, we're not mad about that. We really needed that to land so that we have at least some amount of symmetry between lists and libraries. The AutoFill column has some updates. SharePoint alerts retirement. That was posted on LinkedIn. I reposted that this morning, and we'll go into what that is. And then, as we're titling it, less Kool-Aid. So AI is important, but agents are more important. So there's been some sort of changes in the marketing messaging from Microsoft on AI, and so we'll touch on that briefly. All right, sharing up UI updates. Let's start there. So this is something we've, as MVPs, we've known has been coming for a little while now. They're also calling them hero links. So essentially, the sharing dialogue is and how sharing works is getting a refresh, and I'm not mad about any of this. So first is that when you have a sharing link, if you want to change it, you're updating the link that has already been sent instead of creating new ones by default. And so that's an absolutely excellent update. And then my favorite,
every object has one link.
That's right.
Have as many as you create.
By default, it has one link.
It's a hero.
It is a hero. And then if you watched our security permissions episode like 3 or 4 episodes ago, the other new thing that's coming that I'm really excited about is by default, people with existing access is going to be the scope of that link. That is a departure from how it is now, where it is whatever it's set to. The default is whatever it's set to at the site level. This is much better because it doesn't break inheritance by default. And so for people who don't necessarily look at it and just want that quick sharing link, this is a significantly better default setting. Administrators can still change the default on a per site or OneDrive basis, but the default is people with existing access out of the box. And so I really enjoy that. I think that's a great update. In addition to that, you can add or update access to that object, file or folder, or the object in the link that you've already have existed. So you can go and say, oh, I want to change who that is. And so that gives users that granular control they need to be very specific on that piece of content itself. And so I think that's another great addition to that. You can also update permissions in bulk. So you can see who has permissions and then in bulk change who has access. So instantly changing it. So when you change it, immediately that link has that change security on it. And so that's definitely an updated experience. And then finally, as I alluded to earlier, you can, if you need to, create additional sharing links on the object, and then you can give them names. So I love this. So like if you have a default link that you're sharing things with, and that link is being used, but you need a special link for just one extra person that's outside that scope, and you want to have that one have a different like lifespan, or instead of the other one has edit, this one you only want to have view or whatever it might be, you can create an additional link, scope it exactly how you want to. That might be different from how your default link is scoped, and then you have that additional link and can move forward. So this gives you the best of both worlds, but with that default experience being the best one.
What would be
So,
really great is if they gave us better tools on the back end to manage all of this,
well, that's
in addition to the stuff that's on the front end. Guys got a
yeah.
dream, right?
Yeah, and I think, some of our partners are trying to start addressing that. I know
Absolutely.
Orchestry has some thoughts on that and is working to provide some tools. But you're right. I mean, it would be good for everyone who has access to SharePoint Online to have, and for administrators to have access to that information, for sure. Dan. That's fantastic. Yes,
it's sort of
I
it's sort of
know.
like snow in
Unlike me.
August. It just doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
it is unlike me to not be mad about something. Agreed. All right, let's move on. Mark, why don't you talk to us about forms on document libraries?
Okay, first off, this screenshot is not of it. It's a list form because I could not for the life of me find a screenshot of the new forms on document libraries. Microsoft using common words for everything means that you can't ever find anything. But the good thing is it's going to be very similar to what the whatever the name for those list forms is. It says forms up in the toolbar in the list. It's going to be the same thing in a document library. The difference will be as you're designing the form, there's going to be a block. I believe it's at the top above the metadata by default that says, upload your file here. As you'd expect, list and libraries are sort of the same thing, except that document libraries need a document. You're going to have flexible layouts for branding and stuff. This one's got a greenish background. You can do a purplish background. You can make them a little cuter. Drag and drop column ordering, which is nice. And then just like lists, your users don't actually have to know where the library is, nor do they have to have actual permissions on it. So you can do things like anonymous file, or not anonymous, have people upload files without actually giving them permission to the library itself. So I'm sure you can think of all kinds of scenarios there that will help enable. I think that's pretty cool. Sorry.
I was going to say, this reminds me of the old content organizer. Where you could use something to upload a document, and then based on metadata, you could decide where it went. So very easily with like a Power Automate flow or a Logic App or something, you could turn the crank.
Yeah, the nice thing here is you're not going to actually have to do any work on the back end, and the document will just land where it's supposed to, which is good. And the other thing that I think is great about this is if you make a column required, they won't be able to submit the form until they put a value in for that metadata column. So it's actually going to be required metadata on the
Casper is going to lose his mind right now.
On the form as opposed to on the library itself.
But that's going to break that basic idea, because that's never worked before. Well, at least not in modern.
No, it's going to work now.
Giving it to you now.
Yep.
They're giving it to you now. We just had that conversation.
It's basically the same thing that you see in lists, right? You can't push the button unless you fill in the values.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Interesting change. But I suspect that if you drag the item in and you're not on the form, it's the same experience.
Oh, sure. The forms are just another entry mechanism. They're just, the nice thing is they have a link. You can distribute that link. The person doesn't have to have permissions to the library. All of the same stuff on the library itself still works the same. You can go there, especially as a library owner, you can drag in 100 things with folders if you wanted to. But this is a way to present to other people and collect documents from them.
Right. So the idea that you can embed this form elsewhere, and this is the user interface they see to the library, ergo them not being able to get a form or a document, into the library without actually filling in all the required fields. And as Dan just said in the chat, Q users saying, I know I uploaded the document. I suspect he's right. You're going to end up with a support issue there because people aren't going to realize they didn't submit.
Except you're not going to, if you can't click the submit button, You haven't
Right.
submitted anything.
Understood, but people will be like, well, I put all the stuff and I thought I did it, but it didn't really go, and I didn't really know.
People can always lie, sure.
Of course. I'm just sort of saying they'll be confused by it.
Yeah. The other nice thing I've seen with the list forms around this is you can have multiple forms for multiple purposes. Now, that might not be an excellent architecture, but say you have a couple of different kinds of documents you want to store in the same document library. You could have variations on that form based on what kind of document it is, and you would just have multiple links. So you might have, in this case, the last contact or reminder date be required for one kind of document and not for another. And you're collecting things the way they should be collected. So I think this is a huge step forward for information architecture and metadata. And I hope it happens soon.
The form is only for adding items though, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not an editing experience. Carol asked, did we have an ETA on this? Does anybody know?
I don't think I remember when they.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think I know that it actually is working in dog food, so it can't be too far out.
Cool. Casper said, do they know about content types? I would say yes, it's the content type. If you put, oh, well, maybe that's not a form field. If you have multiple content types, maybe it's not a field you can put on the form. Menu and lists? I actually don't know.
They did not demo it that way because, of course, we'll find out when we get it. But I mean, and again, I would look to the list forms and see if it supports content types that way. I to be honest, I haven't tested that.
Yep.
Well, content types aren't important, right, Mark?
Oh no. Nope. Everything in SharePoint is a content type.
All right, how about the autofill column?
Okay, I couldn't find a good image for this either. This is all, coming soon. So the idea was here is that autofill columns have been around for a little while. They were part of syntax and were expensive, and now they are sort of coming to the pay-go world, though I think they already had, and the pricing is going way down. So one of the nice things is when you go to create a new autofill column, it actually there's some AI-ish kind of behavior there, and it looks at the contents of that library and suggests autofill columns that you might want to add, which is pretty cool. Of course, if you're an information architect, you know which ones you're going to want to add, and you can do it that way as well. But you basically give it some natural language prompt to say, fill in the flight time from the reservation document or whatever it is that makes sense given your context. And the values will be auto-filled as the documents are loaded into the library. The pricing went way down. That's the decimal place moved over one spot. So instead of a nickel a page, it's 0.05 of a cent a page. So you can imagine that your budget will not go overboard as fast as it used to. I think it's pretty cool. I think one of the problems with Syntex was that it was such a huge step up in licensing and sort of mindset. We're content processing, and so we're going to do this thing. Now you can embed these autofill columns where they need to be, and just pay for the capability when you need it.
Casper made the comment about autofill columns can be created as site columns, kinda.
What's the kinda?
I don't know.
You can't define it in the content type up and just inherit it. You have to set it up on the library.
On the library itself. Yeah. So it's not, so it's a site column except that it's a list column.
It's a site column, but you have to define it. You have to add more context when you add it up to the library. But it's still a list as a site column as far as search goes. That's
right. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
As far as search goes. Yeah. It's another instance where they don't really understand the powerful information architecture that they built years ago. So hopefully they'll take care of that.
One can only hope. All right. Next up, Derek, you want to hit on the SharePoint agent alerts retirement, excuse me?
Yeah, so technically I didn't see this announced at the conference, but this was a fast follow that was sent out like early on Monday. And that is that SharePoint alerts are retiring starting in July. And essentially what that means is those little alerts that send folks notifications every time an item is updated or created or modified or deleted, that is all going away. And so the recommended path for migration is to use either Power Automate or SharePoint rules. I would say, just sort of in passing, my recommendation would be to use rules. Power Automate seems like a little bit of an overkill, just to send an email to what, like for me personally, to set up an email alert on a list, if all I'm doing is getting notified. But the CLI for Microsoft 365 does have an assessment tool that you can use to sort of sniff out where all the alerts are set up so that you can start to make a plan for these things. The way right now that the timeline for this is working is that starting in July, so very soon, new tenants will not have this functionality. So any new tenant that's created, users will not be allowed to create SharePoint alerts. Starting in September, your existing tenant users will not be able to create any new alerts. And then in October, this one, I was a little fuzzy on the wording with this one, but essentially the way I read it, it was that existing alerts will expire 30 days later. So when they are run, they'll have a 30-day time period, and then they will start to expire. Once
So
they
it'll
expire,
work just like Power Automate flows.
Yes. Essentially what will happen is users have the ability to re-enable them. And this is where I got a little confused on this, was whether or not the users can continue to re-enable them for 30 days until July of 2020. Actually, that should be July of 2026. Sorry, my mistake. Or whether it's just a one-time thing. So if it comes up for renewal in October.
I bet
Do you
they
know?
can renew it. I bet that based on what I'm reading, I bet they can renew it every 30 days up until July
October.
2026.
Yeah, that's the way I was thinking as well. So
I think
at any rate,
we would want to encourage people to switch to rules, though, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So ideally, if you've got users that are using SharePoint alerts, which I'm sure everyone is, that I would start to, let the users know that this is coming in the fall and that they should start to switch over when they get the alerts. If they notice that there's an alert, and if you want to be more proactive, run the assessment and then go find those users. So that's my 2 cents on that.
To the conversation that's happening in chat, Dan brought up, well, the rules are tied to the user that created it. And my response to him was, but so are Power Automate flows. And his point was, well, at least there's discoverability for the Power Automate flows. I would argue that there's not really that great of discovery. I mean, I think that's half the problem with the Power Platform, is discoverability is not awesome. You need APIs and or PowerShell scripts or whatever to really do a thorough job of that, and you need to be of an elevated enough permissions to do it. So I don't know that. I think my guidance personally would be, if you've got a one-off list and a rule doesn't work for you for whatever reason, so you need more workflow on that list than just a rule is going to give you, and the rules are a slight step up from alerts in some ways, the way you can configure them. They have a little bit more configurability to them. If you need more workflow than just that on a one-off list, then Power Automate, I think, is a fine way to go. As long as you understand that you need some governance around those Power Automate flows, because it's connected to the user who creates it and all the things that is a delegated permission situation. If you need that workflow on multiple lists, so you have a list template or a provisioning scenario or something then you really, really need to reconsider moving to a pro code solution, which could be webhooks, or it could be event grid events, or whatever it might be. But the idea of just attaching Power Automate flows to tens of hundreds of lists throughout your tenant to do the exact same thing is just unmanageable. And for me personally, I just don't think that's the right way to go.
I agree.
Enterprise ready.
Exactly. Let's see. Was there any other questions? Someone said alerts is the classic alerts in SharePoint. Does this extend to the newish rules? And so that's exactly what we're saying. This is for the classic SharePoint alerts that's been around since the classic on-prem systems. The rules are the replacement. So SharePoint rules is the replacement for that, and or Power Automate, and or Pro Code Story, as I just sort of. Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Moving on. AI agents are the focus. So Derek, do you want to just talk us through some of this?
And I think, you know, one of the big takeaways from the conference was really about a change in language and a change in messaging. That, you know, it was all like at the very beginning, it was all Copilot's going to change the world. Copilot, AI is going to do this. AI is going to do that.
FOMO as a business requirement.
I love that.
And we have our winner for the intro to this video today at mark the time. Got it. 12:51.
So you know, it was really like this one big monolithic thing. And then the messaging started shifting where, oh, well, Copilot isn't actually like, it's an umbrella. It's a thing, but it's also an umbrella. And now what we're seeing is exactly. And now what we're starting to see is a little more of a focused message. So they're focusing the message more on agents that do a thing. And so, you know, whether it's a declarative agent or whether it's, you know, a SharePoint agent, we've got each one of those things, and each one of those has a focus. Now, there's two agents that they've released. It's the researcher agent and the analyst agent. These are sort of helper agents that you can use in your tenant. The researcher, as it says, helps you really do deep reasoning and complex tasks to do research, to help deliver information about what you're trying to do. The analyst is pretty cool. It basically starts to think like a data scientist. So you can sort of go over the data that you have in minutes versus like you actually trying to perform like actual, you know, actual insights here. And it's really, I think we're seeing a maturing of the process, right? We're seeing a maturing of the message. This was all just one big giant blob 6 or 12 months ago. And now we're starting to get a little bit more refinement, a little more better use cases, better user stories, and with that, better tooling. And so, you know, the SharePoint agents, we can build on lists and libraries and those kinds of things. So I think we're going to see the message get more refined over time, but that was a very consistent theme throughout the conference.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. So basically these two agents, researchers and analysts, are like pre-trained agents that have particular tasks associated with them, like that they have a focus on what they're going to do for you, and they're pre-trained to do those things. And then there's sort of that idea that, you know, there's from sort of no code to pro code ways to build your own agents to target real user requirements you have in your organization. And I think that is one of the things that I think there's more to talk about there. There is a aspect of the maturity model, which we talk about a lot on Ask and Practice, that we could apply to the idea of Copilot is just a sort of marketing umbrella word to talk about, you know, Copilot, the thing that's embedded in the browser, if that's embedded in the desktop and Office apps on the web. It's the thing that is the SharePoint agents. It's Copilot Studio built agents. It's declarative agents that you can, you know, link up multiple various APIs as helpers to the large language model. And then there's, full-blown custom engine agents where you're bringing your own LLM, you're bringing your own orchestrator, you're bringing all your helping functionality to that agent, so that you can really dial in and target the large language models to sort of help you do tasks in that way. Mark and I also had Mark and I also had a session at a workshop we did together on the last day talking about PnP modern search. And one of the things the question that was brought to that session was around, well, people are telling me that we don't need search anymore because Copilot's going to do it for us. And, luckily we had one slide on that we kind of heard about this ahead of time and added a slide for that day. But it's sort of, there's different use cases for when a sort of an agent is the right way versus when search is the right way. Sometimes you really want to see that original piece of content and it's not appropriate to have it summarized. So you still need both. And so I wanted to just sort of, and my part, I wanted to end on saying, search should not be thought of as going away, should not be thought of as not important anymore. And certainly information architecture and metadata shouldn't be thought as important anymore. All of that together, the agents, the search, and your information architecture are all going to come together to give you this trifecta of leveraging the information in your tenant to the next level. And that's a maturity thing. Mark, I interrupt you off.
Yeah, I think that maybe the holy grail of all of this is not just generating a bunch of text like, here, help me write an email. Generative AI, that's cool and everything, and we all think it's amazing, and we're making pictures of our dogs that look like robots and stuff. But actually have these agents accomplish something for you, like, okay, now go mark this task as complete because we did this other stuff. So it's more like applying AI to a process flow, or
Yep.
AI to in a sense to a flow, to
Yep.
a process driven, the standard process mapping kind of thing, and having AI, having Copilot accomplish some of those steps for you where you're not adding any significant value.
And you can start to do that today with declarative agents and with custom engine agents. Both of those bring that, ability to use natural language to initiate a set of steps or a workflow that capture information, update information, create information, automate a whole process, because you are hooking in APIs to other systems that are tools for that agent to use. Excuse me. So I think we're definitely going to see that.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the three of us who are on the call who went to the conference, and Carrie, our cynicism dial went down a little bit on this stuff.
Yeah.
We're starting to see more rational, what I think of as more rational application of these technologies, as opposed to, like when the internet first came out, it's like, it's going to do everything. It's going to not just send you dog food, it's going to walk your dog. Well,
yeah.
that wasn't the thing, and still isn't.
My cynicism meter was more around the way marketing was talking about it. It's the same cynicism I had around the fact that they said Power Automate or Power Platform was the only way to extend Microsoft 365, and marketing just pounded that message forever when it's just really not true. And so it felt like the same thing was happening with Copilot. Like, Copilot is the answer, like as if it did everything.
So it's a
right
marketing problem, you're saying?
In my opinion, it is a marketing problem. It's not like they didn't know the pieces needed to be built, but they didn't market it like, here's the first step, and here's what we imagine, and here's how it might come. That felt like it wasn't how they were doing it. They were sort of just saying, this is what it is, and it does everything. This time, and the reason I'm sort of dialed back a lot, is this time it felt like they were sending the message, yes, here's the different pieces of the tools that help you do all of these things.
Right.
So. Yeah. All right. Well, We have a bunch of resources, 2 slides worth. So we'll have all of these resources available for you on the website after we publish this episode. So you'll be able to get to all of that goodness. But June 11th. So be aware that is skipping a date. So the bulk of the Simpraxis team will be at either the European Collaboration Summit or Techorama. And so we've decided to skip the what would be the May 28th episode of Ask Simpraxis. And so we're skipping that to June 11th. And that June 11th episode, we're going to take that idea of a maturity model for co-pilots and deep dive into it a little bit more and talk about what are all our thoughts on that subject. So as I already said, European Collaboration Summit, Techorama, that's happening next. And most of us will be in one of those 2 places. There are still a few tickets left for European Collaboration Summit. So get yours today before they run out. And then after that, Derek and I will be at TechCon 365 in Seattle. And with that, that is the end of another episode of Ask Simpraxis. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Simpraxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.